The system renamed your cage and convinced you to call it freedom. You wake up every day believing you are an independent individual, charting your own course, making your own choices. Yet you carry a silent exhaustion. You feel the weight of endless rules, the constant need for approval, the quiet anxiety of stepping out of line. You are treated not as a sovereign being, but as a subordinate who must constantly ask for permission simply to exist. The chains of the past were made of iron, heavy and loud. The chains of today are made of paper, digital records, and bureaucratic mandates. They are invisible, but they bind you just the same. We have traded true independence for a comfortable, managed existence where every natural right has been converted into a conditional privilege. It is time to look at the invisible architecture controlling your life. Control mechanisms do not disappear. They simply evolve to become more acceptable to the human mind. Centuries ago, domination was brutal and obvious. Today, it is psychological and administrative. The brilliant maneuver of the modern era was replacing the harsh vocabulary of ownership with the sterile language of administration. You are no longer seen as property, but you are categorized as a taxpayer, a citizen, a licensed entity. The terminology shifted, but the fundamental dynamic of authority and obedience remained fully intact. Consider the psychological toll of this reality. When an institution treats you as a subject operating under its jurisdiction, it implicitly dictates that your rights are not inherent to your birth. They are granted, and what is granted can be regulated, taxed, or revoked. You feel this deep down when you hesitate to start a project or build something on your own, instinctively worrying about who you must appease first. This constant deference erodes your natural confidence, replacing it with a compliant, submissive mindset. To break this mental conditioning, you must clearly see the exchange that has taken place. You must recognize that true sovereignty does not require a stamp of approval. Your intrinsic value and right to navigate the world are yours by nature, not by government decree. Acknowledging this truth does not mean reckless rebellion, but rather a profound internal shift. You stop viewing yourself as a dependent seeking validation and begin operating as an autonomous adult navigating a flawed system. Look closely at the foundational logic of the modern world. We operate under a system where almost everything is prohibited by default, unless you possess a specific piece of paper granting you an exception. The natural order has been entirely inverted. In a truly liberated state, every action is permitted unless it causes direct harm to another. Today, the assumption is that you are forbidden to act, create, or provide until you prove your compliance to an overseeing authority. You want to harvest food from a river, you need a license. You want to alter the land you supposedly own, you need a permit. You want to offer your skills to a neighbor for compensation, you need an authorization. The emotional cost of this is a pervasive sense of powerlessness. It conditions you to feel like a perpetual child, unable to make sound judgments without the guidance and permission of a state apparatus. It breeds an underlying anxiety, a fear of being penalized simply for engaging in the natural processes of human survival and commerce. Reclaiming your mindset requires recognizing this default state for what it is, an artificial construct designed for management, not a moral absolute. You do not need an authority to legitimize your competence or your right to exist productively. While you may have to navigate these rules practically, you must never internalize them morally. Your permission to act comes from your own capability and your respect for the boundaries of others, not from a bureaucratic signature. At its absolute core, a license is not a mark of qualification. It is a formal admission of subordination. It is a document where a superior entity grants you the temporary right to do something that would otherwise be considered a violation. It is the ultimate psychological tool for establishing dominance. By forcing you to apply for the right to act, the system reinforces your position as a subservient participant rather than a primary owner of your own life and choices. This dynamic slowly destroys masculine discipline and self-reliance. When you must constantly seek external validation to move forward, you lose the instinct to trust your own judgment. You wait for a green light that often comes wrapped in delays and fees. It drains your ambition and replaces your drive with administrative fatigue. You become exhausted not by the hard work of building a life, but by the endless friction of proving you have the right to build it in the first place. The antidote is to mentally detach your self-worth from these external validations. You must build absolute trust in your own competence. A piece of paper does not make you a master of your craft, nor does the lack of one diminish your actual skill. Approach the system's requirements as logistical hurdles, much like bad weather, rather than moral judgments on your right to act. Maintain your internal authority. You comply where necessary for survival, but you never confuse their permission with your innate power. The modern authority you report to is not a single tyrant you can look in the eye. It is an overwhelming, faceless machine called bureaucracy. This machine has no empathy, no logic, and no limits to its growth. It exists primarily to justify its own existence, generating increasingly complex layers of rules and requirements. It thrives on creating confusion, forcing you to depend on its interpretation of the very labyrinth it designed. Fighting this machine directly often leads to bitter frustration. It feeds on your energy and your time. You stand in lines, you fill out forms, you wait for automated responses, and you realize you're negotiating with a ghost. The frustration turns into a quiet, simmering anger that bleeds into your personal life. It makes you feel small, insignificant, and entirely at the mercy of individuals hiding behind desks and institutional policies, draining the vitality out of your daily existence. Do not waste your life force screaming at a wall. Recognize the nature of the beast. It is a mindless algorithm of control. Your strategy must be maneuverability, not brute force. Learn to navigate the bureaucratic landscape with cold, detached efficiency. Do what is required to pass the checkpoint, but do not let it consume your mental space. Save your profound energy for building your own life, your own networks, and your own competence, far away from the sterile lights of institutional corridors. History repeats its core structures under different names. In the past, the laborer handed over a portion of his harvest to the ruling lord in exchange for the privilege of working the land and receiving protection. Today, a massive fraction of your time, labor, and energy is extracted by force before you even see the fruits of your work. This is framed as a civic duty, but structurally, it is the exact same tribute demanded by the sovereign from the subordinate. The pain here is the realization of stolen time. Every dollar taken represents hours of your life, moments away from your family, and energy expended that you can never get back. When you realize that you must work for months out of every year simply to satisfy the financial demands of the system before you can start building your own foundation, it can lead to deep resentment. You are renting your own existence, paying a subscription fee merely to participate in society. You cannot simply opt out of this reality overnight, but you can change how you operate within it. Shift your focus toward absolute efficiency and the acquisition of hard assets that cannot be easily inflated or extracted. Become undeniably valuable. Build streams of resources that grant you leverage. The goal is to generate so much momentum and capability that the tribute, while unjust, becomes a mere nuisance rather than a paralyzing burden. You outgrow the cage by becoming too strong for it to hold you back. The illusion of choice is the ultimate pacifier for the masses. We believe that voting or choosing our managers makes us fundamentally free. You are handed a carefully curated menu of options within a rigidly controlled framework. This makes you feel deeply in charge of your destiny, while the fundamental reality of your subordination remains entirely untouched. The machine simply lets you pick the color of its paint. You invest intense emotional energy into political theater. You argue, defend, and hope that the next chosen leader will finally grant you the peace you deserve. But the crushing reality sets in when you realize the administrative machine continues to expand regardless of who sits at the helm. You are exhausted by false hope, eventually recognizing that you are merely picking the flavor of your own endless management. The hidden truth is that true freedom does not come from selecting a better administrator for your daily life. It comes from systematically minimizing their reach into your personal affairs. Stop waiting for a savior in a suit to grant you permission to thrive. Direct that massive emotional energy inward. Build a life so robust and self-sufficient that the changing of guards at the top becomes entirely irrelevant to you. Society conflates being an obedient citizen with being a truly free individual. They are absolutely not the same thing. Citizenship is a contractual status designed by the state, laden with obligations, taxes, and conditional privileges that can be revoked. Sovereignty, however, is the undeniable recognition that you are the sole absolute ruler of your own mind, your physical body, and your personal output. When you deeply adopt the identity of a mere citizen, you unconsciously accept that your fundamental rights can be voted away or restricted for the greater good. You live with a quiet, persistent anxiety, always monitoring the shifting winds of legislation to see what you're allowed to do next. You surrender your intrinsic power to the collective mass, losing your sharp individual edge and natural masculine drive. You must actively reclaim the lost identity of a sovereign individual. This is a profound, silent internal shift. You no longer ask for your rights, you assert them through your competence, your wealth, and your unbreakable boundaries. You interact with the system strictly out of pragmatic necessity, never out of moral duty. By acting as the master of your domain, you develop an unshakable core of quiet power. The invisible chains of this era are held together not by brute physical force, but by a sophisticated, carefully engineered architecture of fear. It is the fear of crippling fines, the fear of social isolation, and the fear of losing your livelihood. The system constantly projects itself as the thin, necessary line between order and total chaos, convincing you that without its heavy control, everything would collapse. This engineered anxiety keeps you entirely paralyzed in mediocrity. You hesitate to take bold risks, to start the independent business, to speak the undeniable truth, or to step outside the prescribed societal path. You trade your immense human potential for a meager, heavily regulated safety. The ultimate tragedy is watching men grow old, deeply regretting the empires they never built because they feared a piece of paper. Understand clearly that fear is the primary currency of your control. To break this architecture, you must mentally confront the phantom. Realize that a caged animal is technically safe from predators, but it is utterly devoid of life and spirit. Embrace the inherent risk of existing on your own terms. When you stop fearing their administrative penalties more than you fear a wasted life, the system loses its grip. The modern bureaucratic trap is incredibly alluring precisely because it is terribly soft. You're not beaten into submission, you're slowly sedated into it. Endless digital entertainment, processed modern conveniences, and the illusion of constant connection keep you distracted from the reality of your boundaries. The cage is gilded, perfectly equipped with screens and comforts designed to prevent you from testing the bars. Because of this, you suffer from a specific kind of modern lethargy. A deep, unexplainable emptiness haunts your quiet evenings. You have everything you supposedly need to survive, yet you feel entirely hollow inside. This engineered comfort breeds profound weakness, making the mere thought of real struggle or true independence feel physically exhausting. You become a passive consumer instead of a fierce, active creator. You must aggressively introduce voluntary discomfort back into your daily routine, reject the heavy sedation of modern convenience. Build raw physical strength, master highly complex skills, and deliberately seek out challenges that force you to rely entirely on yourself. When you voluntarily walk into the fire of discipline, the comfortable cage loses its hypnotic appeal. You remember what it feels like to be truly dangerous. The ultimate, quiet victory of the administrative state is the systematic destruction of human self-reliance. Over generations, basic survival skills and deep community resilience have been outsourced to massive, uncaring institutions. You are heavily conditioned to call an expert, fill out a government form, or rely on a state program for everything from your personal health to your physical security and daily sustenance. This deliberate outsourcing creates a fragile, highly dependent population of men. When a crisis hits or the supply chain falters, you feel a terrifying deep vulnerability. You realize you lack the practical competence to protect and provide for your own blood without assistance. This dependency completely strips away masculine confidence, leaving you feeling like a helpless spectator hoping the institutions do not fail. True independence is not a philosophical or political status. It is a measurable set of hard skills. Begin the relentless daily pursuit of practical competence. Learn to build, to repair, to defend, and to generate immense value outside the corporate structure. As your personal capability expands, your reliance on the system rapidly shrinks. True confidence is born from the proof that you can handle reality on your own. The first step to true independence is not a physical escape, but a brutal mental awakening. You must consciously stop defining your reality through the vocabulary of the administration. They built the walls in your mind before they built them in the physical world. You have spent decades asking yourself what you're allowed to do, instead of what you're capable of doing. This mental filter severely limits your potential, forcing you to shrink your ambitions to fit inside predefined bureaucratic boxes. You feel the constant friction of second-guessing your own natural instincts, paralyzing your drive out of fear of non-compliance. Tear down the vocabulary of the cage. Start evaluating your actions based on absolute competence and strict moral limits, not on administrative permission. The moment you stop seeing yourself as a subordinate asking for a favor, the invisible walls around you begin to shatter. Society operates on a vast network of unwritten assumptions and invisible rules that nobody dares to question. We obey them not because they are inherently true or necessary, but simply because we inherited them. Compliance has become a blind, automatic reflex. You follow the prescribed path, begging for the right permits, paying the endless fees, and wonder why your soul feels utterly drained. You obey rules that actively punish your ambition while rewarding absolute mediocrity. You sacrifice your prime years to a structure that views you only as a compliant number on a spreadsheet. Begin the daily practice of relentless questioning. Demand to know the true purpose behind every restriction placed upon your life. Does a rule exist to protect humanity, or does it exist solely to protect and feed the machine? When you expose the absurdity of a regulation, you strip away its power over your mind. The administration promises you absolute safety, but the hidden price is your total autonomy. They sell you the illusion that risk is the ultimate enemy, slowly convincing you to trade your inherent freedom for the comforting embrace of strict supervision. Look around at the men who have accepted this exact trade. They are wrapped in safety, heavily insured, fully permitted, and completely miserable. They have avoided all danger, but in doing so, they have avoided actually living. The anxiety of potentially breaking a minor regulation haunts them more than the tragedy of wasting their one brief life. Accept that a meaningful life is inherently dangerous. Stop prioritizing a sterile, perfectly safe existence over a powerful, sovereign one. Reclaim your right to take calculated risks. The scars earned from building your own independent path are infinitely more honorable than the smooth skin of a man who never left his designated enclosure. Your inner authority was not lost overnight. It was slowly surrendered through thousands of minor compromises. Every time you waited for an expert to tell you how to live or an official to grant you the right to act, you handed over a piece of your core masculine strength. This continuous surrender leaves you deeply indecisive and weak. When faced with a crisis, you freeze, frantically searching for external guidance because the muscle of your own judgment has completely atrophied. You feel like a passive passenger in the vehicle of your own life, sitting in the back seat while anonymous administrators drive you to their chosen destination. Take the wheel back by force. Start making absolute, final decisions for yourself. No matter how small they seem at first, trust the heavy weight of your own judgment. When you rely on your own ironclad principles rather than the shifting rules of society, you build an impenetrable fortress of inner authority. The shift to true sovereignty is not announced with a loud, chaotic revolution. It is built through quiet, deliberate acts of silent defiance. You do not need to scream at the system to defeat its grip on you. You simply need to slowly and methodically detach your life from its complex grid. Most men burn themselves out trying to fight the bureaucratic machine directly, drowning in endless arguments and public outrage. This emotional reaction only feeds the system, leaving you exhausted, bitter, and exactly where you started. You waste your precious energy fighting a massive shadow instead of building your own solid light. Shift to a strategy of absolute quiet competence. Build a secondary income stream they cannot easily control. Learn a hard skill that makes you indispensable. Cultivate a strong local network that bypasses the need for state intervention. Your ultimate revenge against a system of control is building a powerful life that simply no longer requires it. A profound transformation occurs when you stop viewing yourself as a victim of a rigged system and start seeing yourself as a strategist operating within it. You're no longer the complaining citizen demanding fairer treatment from the administrative masters. You adopt the cold, calculating mindset of a sovereign individual who understands the board, knows the rules, and plays the game strictly to secure his own autonomy. The pain of clinging to the old identity is endless frustration. If you continue to see yourself as a dependent subject, you will forever be disappointed when the system fails to protect or reward you fairly. You will carry a heavy, bitter resentment that ages you prematurely. You will waste your masculine drive arguing with the mechanisms of your cage instead of using your strength to simply walk out of the open door. Step firmly into this new frame of mind. You owe the system nothing beyond the logistical requirements necessary to maintain your freedom of movement. Your true loyalty belongs to your principles, your family, and your unbreakable inner standard. When your identity shifts from obedient participant to silent strategist, the bureaucracy loses its emotional hold over you forever. True power is measured by how much of your life exists completely outside the reach of their administrative control. If your entire income, your assets, and your social standing are deeply embedded within the heavily regulated corporate and state machinery, you are entirely vulnerable. You must deliberately begin building structures that thrive in the spaces they cannot easily monitor or mandate. Most men live with the terrifying subconscious knowledge that one minor administrative error, one canceled license, or one shift in policy could instantly destroy their livelihood. They sleep poorly, haunted by the fragility of an existence that depends entirely on the continuous approval of faceless institutions. This profound vulnerability breeds a quiet, desperate obedience that slowly kills the spirit. Construct your life with uncompromising redundancy. Cultivate hard skills that are always in demand, regardless of the economic climate. Build networks of mutual exchange based on actual trust, not legal contracts. Secure resources that retain absolute value. When you possess the undeniable ability to rebuild your life from scratch outside their walls, you achieve a level of peace that most men will never comprehend. In a world heavily saturated with printed credentials and meaningless bureaucratic titles, absolute competence has become the rarest and most dangerous currency. A piece of paper only proves that you endured an administrative process. Raw, undeniable skill proves that you can bend reality to your will. The system rewards compliance, the natural world rewards extreme competence. When you lack real-world skills, you are forced to trust the experts assigned to you by the system. You become a helpless observer when your physical health fails, your property breaks down, or your finances collapse. You hand over massive amounts of your wealth to fix problems you should be able to solve yourself. Incompetence is the heaviest tax you will ever pay, and it guarantees your continued subordination. Sharpen the sword of your own ability every single day. Become a man of immense practical value. Learn how systems actually work, from the engines of commerce to the mechanics of your own biology. When you can solve complex problems with your own hands and your own mind, you walk through the world with a heavy, silent confidence. You do not need their permission to be powerful. True independence is not a romantic, cinematic dream of living perfectly alone in the wilderness. It is a harsh, demanding reality. It requires you to carry the full, crushing weight of your own existence without the comfortable safety net of the state. It means accepting total responsibility for your failures, your security, and your future, with no one to blame but yourself when things go completely wrong. As you detach from the collective mindset, you will experience a profound, isolating silence. The masses will not understand your refusal to participate in their anxiety. They will call you cynical or reckless, because your quiet autonomy highlights the reality of their own heavy chains. You will feel the deep loneliness that always accompanies the decision to step away from the heavily guarded herd. Embrace this absolute solitude. It is the necessary atmosphere of the sovereign man. The isolation you feel is simply the space you have cleared around yourself, free from their noise and their mandates. In this quiet space, your mind becomes incredibly sharp, your decisions become unclouded, and you finally experience the raw, undiluted reality of being completely in charge of your own life. The final and most critical battleground is your own psychology. The system knows that if it can constantly hijack your attention with manufactured outrage, endless entertainment, and artificial fear, it does not need to build physical prisons. An undisciplined mind will always voluntarily lock itself inside the nearest available cage of distraction and comfort. If you allow your focus to be dragged continuously toward things you cannot control, political theater, societal decay, the endless stream of digital noise, you surrender your sovereignty instantly. You dissipate your powerful masculine energy into a void, leaving you exhausted, anxious, and entirely incapable of building the independent life you desperately claim to desire. Reclaim absolute dominion over your attention. Become ruthless about what you allow into your mental space. Guard your focus as your most vital asset. When you become the undisputed master of your own mind, external control mechanisms shatter entirely. You look at the complex architecture of their rules, you acknowledge their existence, and you simply continue building your own empire in silence. We began by examining the invisible cages built around us, the licenses, the permits, the subtle ways society demands our submission in exchange for an illusion of safety. We confronted the painful reality that we traded our natural sovereignty for the comfortable status of obedient citizens. But seeing the chains is only the first half of the journey. The true work is what follows. You must strip away the vocabulary of permission from your mind. You must replace the anxiety of compliance with the cold, heavy power of extreme competence. Do not waste your life begging the system to loosen its grip. Build a reality so strong, so deeply rooted in your own unbreakable discipline and skill, that their rules become entirely irrelevant to your survival. The only permission you will ever need to live powerfully is your own. If this truth resonated with the quiet part of your mind, subscribe to the channel. We will continue to dissect the illusions of the modern world and build the architecture of true inner freedom.